Lady, you sure you ain't just playing dress-up in that uniform? The white man in a dusty cowboy hat laughed as he leaned against the hood of his truck. Bet you call your daddy every time a spark plug misfires. The group of onlookers, mostly men from the town, chuckled loudly. One even clapped. A teenage boy in a varsity jacket whispered, "I didn't even know black women worked on engines." His friend smirked. "Yeah, maybe she just washes 'em." Ava didn't say a word. She simply wiped the grease off her hands using the same rag she used every morning. Her faded navy blue coveralls were stained at the knees, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. Her eyes didn't flinch. She just stared, calm and unreadable. Like someone waiting for a storm she already knew how to survive. "Need me to call a real mechanic for you?" the cowboy teased again. That's when the noise stopped. Not from her, from the road. 12 hours later, the same gravel driveway outside her garage rumbled under the weight of 6 matte black SUVs moving in perfect formation. Each vehicle bore no plates, just sleek, dark-tinted windows and silent tires that didn't belong on civilian roads. The townsfolk didn't notice, but Ava did. She stood alone under the morning sun, wrench in hand, staring at the wall of vehicles now sealing off her shop entrance. The lead SUV's door opened slowly. A tall, clean-cut white man in tactical gear stepped out. His voice was sharp. "Echo 7?" Ava didn't move. "We need your expertise. This is urgent. You've been activated." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Because the laughter that had filled her garage yesterday had long been replaced by something colder. Something that came with encrypted codes, classified guilt, and the kind of silence that only someone trained to dismantle death could carry without breaking. Redford was the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked, and gossip spread faster than the morning church bell. Population? Barely 2,000. Maybe less, if you didn't count the dogs and drifters. Ava Johnson had lived here for 6 quiet years. She never caused problems, never raised her voice, and never explained why she chose this tiny corner of the world to call home. Every morning at 5 a.m., Ava opened her garage before the first light touched Main Street. She brewed her coffee strong, no sugar, no cream, and turned on the old country radio that still had a bullet dent from a past life. She worked alone, fixing rusted trucks, farm equipment, and occasionally the odd RV that coughed its way through town. Her prices were fair. Her work was flawless. But still, some folks in town looked at her like she didn't belong. "Sweetheart, this town ain't used to your kind under the hood," one elderly customer once told her with a wink. Ava just nodded and kept working. What nobody knew was that behind her workshop wall, behind the faded posters and dusty shelves, was a locked room sealed with biometric access. No one ever entered. No one ever asked. Inside that room sat a military-grade laptop, offline, shielded, and untouched for years. A fireproof safe was buried beneath the floorboards, containing a folder marked E7 and a small charred badge with a scratched-out name. The lights in that room hadn't flickered on since Ava arrived in Redford. She had made sure of that. She didn't want to remember who she used to be. She had walked away from all of it. The codes, the operations, the guilt. The therapy didn't work. The medals meant nothing. They gave her a quiet exit, a fake name, and a promise that Echo 7 would never be called again. So she chose a town where nobody asked questions, a place where she could be just a mechanic, not a weapon. But even in silence, Ava could feel eyes on her. The way the sheriff paused every time he drove past her shop. The way new neighbors whispered about the strange black woman who never smiled. The way local men made bets on whether she'd last the winter or pack up like all the others. Ava didn't respond to any of it. She just fixed engines and prayed that her past would stay buried deep under grease, metal, and dust. The call came just after sundown. Ava was under the hood of an old Ford pickup, hands deep in grease, when her phone buzzed with a blocked number. She almost let it ring out. Almost. But something about the silence between each buzz made her fingers freeze mid-turn. "Yeah?" she answered, wiping her hand on her coveralls. The voice on the other end was male, white, nervous. "Got a vehicle that broke down about 15 miles out, near that dirt road by the forest edge. Kinda urgent. Cash okay?" Ava didn't ask questions, not yet. She packed her tools, locked the garage, and drove her tow truck down a barely paved road that even the sheriff rarely patrolled. Trees closed in on both sides. The light dimmed faster here, like the sky itself didn't want to witness what lay ahead. The SUV was waiting at the edge of the woods, headlights off, body half sunk in mud, like it had been dropped from the sky. It was matte black. No plates. No visible damage. Ava stepped out slowly. The man who greeted her didn't give a name, just handed her the cash in a shaky palm and said, "Just get it to your shop. I'll check in tomorrow." He disappeared into a second car parked behind the trees. Weird. Definitely. But Ava had seen worse. She hooked the SUV to her truck and started a routine inspection before hauling. That's when she saw it. Under the chassis, barely visible, was a thin metal tube embedded into the suspension system. A military-grade thermal sensor. Ava's breath hitched. She adjusted her flashlight. Her eyes scanned for markings. There it was, etched into the side of a small bolt. E7-CXT grid. Her old designation, Echo 7. That bolt was part of a class of counter-surveillance vehicles used only by elite bomb disposal units. Units she thought were long shut down. Units she used to design from scratch. Ava's hands trembled. Not from fear, from memory. This SUV wasn't just a ride gone bad. It was bait. Planted, marked, and delivered to her door by someone who knew exactly where to find her. She took the bolt, slid it into her pocket, and said nothing. Not to the sheriff, not to her neighbors, and definitely not to the strange man who would come knocking tomorrow. She towed the vehicle home, and didn't sleep that night. It was well past midnight when Ava finally stepped into the locked room at the back of her garage. The biometric scanner blinked red, then green. The door creaked open. Dust floated in the stale air, like even the walls remembered what she was trying to forget. She hadn't been in here for years. The room smelled like steel, gun oil, and buried nightmares. She sat at the old metal desk and pulled out the fireproof case. Inside, the laptop, still cold. She pressed her thumb against the encrypted sensor, then waited. The machine hummed awake, slow, cautious, like it too wasn't ready to remember. She removed the bolt from her pocket. Same E7 etching, same weight, same edges. Her fingers hesitated at the keyboard. Then she entered the embedded code pattern she once trained to input blindfolded. 9-dagger-grid-14. The screen flashed white. Then words appeared. Words she never thought she'd see again. Echo 7. Tactical protocol triggered. Active threat confirmed. Ava's stomach sank. Another line followed. Encrypted signature linked to shadow unit remnants. Initiate disarm protocol. Zone compromised. She stared at the screen, her jaw tight. Her pulse didn't race. It slowed, like it always did before something exploded. She shut the laptop. She knew exactly what this meant. Somewhere out there, someone had copied the design of a classified device only she had ever fully dismantled in the field. And now they were using it. Wrong. Sloppy. But still deadly. Ava opened the side drawer and pulled out a cloth-wrapped kit, her old field tools. Tools that weren't supposed to exist anymore. One by one, she laid them on the table. The fiber optic scope, thermal needle, analog voltage tracer. She'd burned her manuals long ago, but muscle memory never lied. She reached into the back of the safe and removed the one thing she'd sworn never to touch again. A steel key, etched with a faded star. The only physical key to a backup drive locked inside a storage vault at an undisclosed base. If that vault even existed anymore. The knock would come in the morning. She knew it now. Whoever left that bolt for her wanted her to know that silence wouldn't protect her anymore. They weren't just asking for help. They were testing her. And tomorrow, they'd want everything. Before sunrise, the quiet streets of Redford buzzed with an unusual tension. 6 matte black SUVs rolled down the main road in perfect formation, engines humming like predators on the hunt. The town's usual early risers paused to watch, whispers spreading fast, but no one dared approach. Ava stood at her garage door, hands clenched, but face calm. The sun's first light caught the glint of tactical badges on the men stepping out. Special forces, no doubt. Their expressions were serious, official. The tallest man, sharp-eyed and stern, stepped forward. Echo 7. Your codes triggered a threat yesterday. We need your expertise immediately. This isn't a request. Ava didn't flinch. She wiped her hands on a rag, locked the garage door behind her, and led the team inside her small workshop. The room was cramped, but to Ava, it was a fortress. On the wall hung a faded photograph. 6 soldiers in full combat gear, faces young and proud. Ava's fingers traced the frame lightly. She was the only one left breathing. The team leader's voice broke the silence. We know what happened to your unit. We know why you disappeared. A tablet lit up with classified footage. A drone crash near a critical military checkpoint. An explosion that failed to detonate fully, but enough to kill dozens if it had worked properly. Ava studied the video with practiced eyes. That's a pulse loop bomb. Delayed secondary trigger. I designed these for classified missions. Someone used my old manuals to build it. The commander's face darkened. We believe 3 more are planted at infrastructure targets. Our experts have tried disarming for 18 hours. No success. Without hesitation, Ava grabbed her worn toolkit and followed the convoy to the regional power grid substation. The area was evacuated for safety, a ghost town with a hidden menace. Her hands moved with the precision of years under fire. Every cut, every disconnection was executed calmly, confidently, like a surgeon saving lives on the operating table. In under half an hour, she neutralized all 4 devices, removing the central reverse pulse cores that could have triggered devastation. A young soldier finally asked, "Ma'am, why did you leave?" "We need you back." Ava looked away, eyes shadowed. "I lost too many. I choose silence now." The team leader nodded. "You were listed KIA for 6 years. The Pentagon believed you dead." Ava whispered, "Dead people don't have to carry impossible choices." After the tense operation, Ava returned to the quiet of her garage. But things were different now. Word had spread silently through the small town. The woman they once mocked had saved lives no one could have imagined. Veterans from neighboring towns began bringing their vehicles to her shop. trusting only her with their broken-down trucks and rusted equipment. Soldiers on leave made special trips just to have her work on their personal rides. Even the teachers and office workers started choosing Ava's garage over the larger chain stores in the bigger cities nearby. No longer did they whisper or stare. Now, they nodded with respect, some even offering quiet smiles. One afternoon, a teenage girl pushed her battered motorcycle through the garage doors. Her face was full of frustration and disbelief. "Everyone at school says girls can't fix engines or understand mechanical stuff," the girl said, her voice shaky but determined. "They think it's a man's job." Ava smiled warmly, setting down her wrench. "People say a lot of things that aren't true. The loudest voices aren't always the wisest." She handed the girl a wrench and began teaching her about compression ratios, timing belts, and the importance of precise measurements. As they worked side by side, Ava felt something she hadn't in years: hope. Her worth, she realized, wasn't measured by medals or military commendations. It was measured by the lives she saved, the peace she had finally found, and the knowledge she passed on. Late that evening, Ava sat in her break room, the familiar hum of the radio playing soft country tunes. Her eyes drifted to the framed photograph of her old unit. 6 young faces, full of life and promise, before that tragic mission. She whispered to the room, "You didn't die because of me. You died because someone else made the wrong call." Tears welled up, but she blinked them away. She had no time for regret anymore. A small, carefully wrapped package arrived weeks later. Inside was a professionally restored photo of Shadow Unit 7, alongside a handwritten note that read, "For the last one standing, still protecting the people, even from behind the scenes." Ava hung the photo proudly next to a faded picture of her father in his military dress uniform, a man who, like her, served quietly without recognition. She knew the fight wasn't over. The world still held its judgment, its hate, its doubt. But Ava Johnson had found a way to rise above it all. And this time, no one would ever underestimate her again. Weeks passed, and the town of Redford slowly began to change its tune. Ava noticed it first in the small things: the respectful nods from the veterans, the quiet thank yous from shopkeepers, the way kids looked up to her with a newfound curiosity. One rainy afternoon, a young black girl pushed a broken-down dirt bike through Ava's garage doors, eyes full of hope and determination. "Everyone says girls can't fix engines," the girl said, voice tinged with frustration. "But I want to learn." Ava smiled, wiping grease from her hands. "People say a lot of things that aren't true. The loudest voices don't always know best. Let me show you how this engine really works." Together, they leaned over the bike, tools in hand, the air filled with the soft clinks of wrenches and the steady rhythm of learning. For Ava, this was more than teaching mechanics. It was passing down strength, resilience, and pride to the next generation. The legacy she carried wasn't just from the battlefield or the scars hidden beneath her coveralls. It was in moments like these, quiet, unassuming, but powerful. Back in her break room, Ava looked again at the framed photo of her old unit. 6 faces frozen in time. She traced the edges gently. "They are with me," she whispered. "Always." Her father's picture hung beside it, a silent reminder of the sacrifices made in silence and honor. Ava knew the world outside Redford was still filled with challenges, injustices, and ignorance. But she had carved out a space where courage wasn't loud or boastful. It was steady, enduring, and deeply personal. She had faced racism, betrayal, and loss. She had walked away from the life she once knew, carrying the weight of ghosts no one else could see. Yet here she stood, a black woman, a mechanic, a silent warrior, stronger than ever. The laughter that once mocked her had been replaced by respect. The silence that once weighed heavy was now filled with purpose. And as the rain tapped gently against the garage windows, Ava smiled quietly to herself. She was home.